What's going on, family? It is your boy Markus here, aka Chart Slayer, and I am here with another video. Look, I got another guest that y'all probably didn't even anticipate being on the show. This man has been killing the game. He's been behind the scenes. One of those behind the scenes people that make all the money though? Like, they one of them. You see what I'm saying? Like, you got the forefront of the people that's really killing the game, the face, but then you really got to pay attention to the silent ones. The silent ones is the ones that's really killing it and really giving you what you want to see. Okay, so I got my man, and I'm one of those people, as you know, on my podcast, I don't even want to introduce. I want them to introduce themselves. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself for the team?
Yeah, man. Appreciate that, Marcus. And before I get into that, they say real G's move in silence.
Yep.
That's a mantra I live by. But my name is Kai Speaks. I'm a producer, full-time content creator, creative director, and really just out here just giving people the tools and the game that they need to be able to live the life that they want. Get the time that they need, get their time back, and to be able to create and just deliver value through content creation and stuff like that. So I just love to help people bring their dreams to the screen.
Man, that's lit, man. That's lit. So can you explain to our people how you got started? On my podcast, I like to really go back in time, right? Like, let's really go, not back to the future, but back to the past. You see what I'm saying? And I want to know what you were doing before and then how you got to the point now.
Shoot, you want the long story or the short story?
Whichever one you want.
I guess the long story turned short-ish. It started off, me and my wife moved from Miami to Atlanta, and I'm just the type of guy that I feel like an opportunity is abundant. So my job, I came from facilities and operations / project management, and they didn't have no opportunities for me when I moved to Atlanta, like no transfer, nothing like that. So I just told my wife, well, if you got the opportunity, we can move to Atlanta, see how we like it, and I'll make something shake regardless.
Right. Got
into sales, really started to enjoy the sales environment, the sales culture. We know with sales, you get a lot of transferable skills. And from there, I got motivated just from being around the people I was around to write a book. And I've always come from like servant leadership. I had a bunch of leadership roles at college. Shout out Cheney University, from Mr. Cheney to RA to campus advisors, presidents, all kinds of stuff. So I wanted to write a book about my experiences. And now fast forward a year after I published my book back in May 2019, I wanted to start a podcast to pretty much use that as a way to pretty much double down on the lessons and principles in the book.
Got you.
Got my first guest on the podcast. Next thing I know, I'm getting a lot of feedback. Oh, wow, we love this guest. We love this type of conversation. This was really raw, really real. I'm like, yo, I want to get more guests on. I want to have more conversations. I don't want to just be the one doing all the talking, because naturally I'm the guy behind the scenes. I'm the one that moves in silence. So being in front of the camera all the time wasn't necessarily my forte. I would much rather have a guest on there and just asking them the questions, kind of like what you do, and you do pretty well. So the more guests I got on, the podcast just took its own identity, right? And I think that's really the best thing that any of us can take away from just building a brand in general, is letting that thing breathe. Like sometimes we want to take too much control over, what if this doesn't happen? What if that doesn't happen? Like, you got to let it breathe and let it be like a kid. Like, you raise your kids, you give them the principles, but at the end of the day, great parents let their kids make the mistakes, let their kids try some new stuff out to just see if they like it or not. And that's what I did for the podcast. And it just grew into this brand that I didn't see it growing into back when I first started it. And from there, we've had over 200 episodes, people's just starting to see what I'm doing. And next thing I know, I get picked up as a producer, producing, one of the top men's growth platforms, Hardly Initiated, ever since, I would say about July, August of last year, 2022.
Man, that's lit, man. That's lit. So I want to really ask you this. Speaking of podcasts and how you really blew up a podcast, do you have a strategy for people who are wanting to get into podcasts, who want to blow up a podcast, who, like some principles that you might have learned as you were making your own before you got to Hardly Initiated? Yeah,
that's a great question. It's two things that are important in all podcasts, but you got to understand the statistics first, and that's 90% of all podcasts end up inactive after not even a year. Like, we literally talking 3 months. 90% of podcasts end up not putting out any more content, and that's because a lot of people are overworking themselves by doing things like not content batching, trying to do lives before they even get their feet wet. They trying to go live every week, and then they realize what happens when they got to go on vacation or when they feel burnt out and stuff like that. So that's just the maintenance of it. But as far as the blow the podcast up, you want to focus on polarity and relevancy. You got to be able to make yourself stand out by being relevant to your audience. And how do you do that? By even first identifying who is the target. A lot of people just go in. This is one thing that I hate, when I hear people who come to me like, hey, yeah, Kai wants to start a podcast. What you want to talk about? Oh, I want to talk about everything. Like,
oh man,
dog,
classic.
Man, you try to talk about everything, you're going to miss everybody, because people can't come to you. Your whole point of a podcaster is to build trust with an audience. That's how you get successful with selling products. That's how you get successful with being consistent with your viewership, growing on YouTube. Everything is building that trust. People can't trust you when they go on your page and it has no theme. It has no niche. They don't know. If I come to you and I'm really looking for, let's say, real estate, and I saw a video that you put up on real estate, but I go to your channel and it's like, that's the only video. And then now you got videos about relationships, videos about e-commerce, videos about social media, videos about all this other stuff. I'm most likely not going to subscribe, and I'm most likely not even going to go follow your other pages like the IG or anything like that. So the relevancy is a big piece. And then the polarity is huge, because now after you, let's say you do find out who your audience is, now we got to deal with the people who like to teeter totter and be on the fence. Yeah. Like, your goal of a podcaster, even as a host and getting guests on, is to make people pick a side, right? Like, even if people disagree with you, I think that once we get past the fear of having people disagreeing with us, we'll become a lot more successful, because the thing about it, the polarity is what gets the shares. Whether you agree or disagree with me, that has nothing to do with it, because what happens when you agree with somebody and it really resonates with you? What do you do first? You usually share it to your friends, share it to your families, you comment, especially if it emotionally triggers you. But the same is true if you really disagree with something too. Like, you share it, like, now you mad, like, look at this guy, he said this, can you believe he said that? And you sharing it, you commenting, oh no, I totally disagree, right? That's where people get Twitter fingers, most likely when they disagree with something. So I would just challenge the people who are listening, trying to start a podcast, to be bold and make polarizing statements. Make people pick a side. It's either A or it's B. It's black or it's white. It's hot or it's cold. None of that, oh, it's lukewarm. None of that.
Right. So speaking of polarity, I want you to really break down how, like, Hardly Initiated and your podcast brings that polarity. Let's start with your podcast, for example. Like, what is your polarity on your podcast? Yeah,
that's great. So it's way different for my podcast than what Hardly Initiated and some of the other podcasts I produce as well, because it is a business podcast. And having a business podcast as well, that these are one of the hardest brands and hardest platforms to grow.
The hardest.
Because unfortunately, not too many people value education like they do entertainment. So one thing that we've really been trying to hone in on is this new word and this new, like, phenom that we like to call edutainment. Right. Trying to bring entertainment to education. And so how we bring polarity to, like, the business space is using words like the only way. You have to do this, right? This is the best thing to do. If you're not doing this, you are sleeping. Like, making people feel like this is what is right, or making people feel like this is what is wrong, right? Again, just making people pick a side. And again, that is actually, it's easier to do, especially when you're talking about, like, help content, business platforms and stuff like that. It does get a little bit harder to phrase it that way when you in, like, the relationship space, or like just the red pill space and all the other stuff. Right. That polarity more so comes from statements like, oh, guys are like this, girls are like this. Yeah. Bringing that gender war in. And you see a lot of channels doing that really well, just knowing how to just push the buttons. And that's one thing I would say that we did with Hardly Initiated, was just knowing how to push the buttons of our audience, especially knowing that our audience consisted of about 70% women, and being a male centric platform, there are certain things that, women don't want to hear coming from guys. And so you just double down on that. And that's what gets that viral sensation of going crazy with a post, just saying things that people are not expecting you to say, being very bold, being very matter of fact in how you say it, and emotionally triggering people, to say the least.
So let me ask you this. When you're doing the polarity aspect, is that within the title or is that within the thumbnail?
Oh, it's within everything. Like, as a content creator and as a producer, because if you start in a podcast, you are a producer. If you don't consider yourself a producer, you're going to need to learn. You're going to have to learn, go into the YouTube university, pick up some books and just learn production. But you should be thinking about polarity in all aspects. Like, I start thinking about the polarity as soon as I get and figure out which guest I want to have for this conversation. As soon as I get the guest name, okay, I'm looking at their content. I'm seeing what stances they have. If they have any stances that I can challenge, if they have any stances that I could really double up on. And then once we get to the conversation, now I'm even, letting them first know that this is a free speech platform. So you want to give people the freedom to speak their truth, speak their language, talk how they talk, so that they feel comfortable to really get crazy if they feel very strongly about something. So that's another way. And then in post-production, Like it's to a point now, Marcus, where like I could be having a conversation and I already know like, oh yeah, that's a clip.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
I know that's a clip.
Crazy.
And you got the black magic, so I'm even looking at the time like, okay, this happened at that time, so I even know where to even look for it.
Exactly, man. It's crazy because people have to know, right? Like they have to know how to emotionally trigger someone. It doesn't even matter if it's bad, even if it's good, right? Because if you can emotionally trigger someone, then that. I remember I had a viral clip, right? It had something to do with finances. This was like, I guess, the polarity part. I said 70% of people don't even have $1,000 in their savings account.
Yeah.
And then that went so viral. It went viral in like 3 days. It went like 300,000 views. And I showed statistics and everything, and they were like, "Well, I got 1,000." Oh, dang, maybe I'm doing something wrong.
Right? Oh, yeah, I got
I got
5.
some. You see what I'm saying? There was somebody who said I got 5. You get what I'm saying? Oh, I got way more than that. I'm not going to disclose my number. Like that's how people were acting. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's crazy how that polarity is true, because when you don't have that, especially like you said on a business platform, that like it's different. But let's talk about like the red pill side, right? Like would you consider hardly initiated in that red pill society?
Nah, definitely not. I would say that we use the red pill conversations to go off of like content that we want to create, but it's definitely a much more mature conversation, to say the least. I would say starting out when we were trying, like still figuring it out, it was a lot of maybe red pill opinions being thrown out on the show and stuff like that. Yeah. But I wouldn't call it a red pill platform, because, we still like to bring, women and men on the show to have a more mature, solution-oriented conversation.
Especially when y'all brought Mrs. 2 Weeks Out on the platform.
Mrs. 2 Weeks Out, Judge Lynn Toller.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
When y'all had that when y'all blew up off, it was something y'all said she had to get on the podcast to say something. Yeah. I forgot what exactly it was.
It was my guy Ryan said something about like high earning women are not, not as attractive, right?
Yes. She's a high earning woman.
She's a high earning woman, obviously, right? Her and Mr. 2 Weeks Out get into that bag, so it's like she just felt emotionally triggered.
She had to say something.
Yeah, so we got her on there. Yeah.
Man, it was good though. I feel like that really put y'all on the platform like crazy. Like everybody in our culture, in the black community, was like, "Who is this?"
And not to cut you off too, to like going back to your point of what I was saying, like putting on that producer hat, like, and not being afraid of the negative, the people who disagree. Like again, Alani disagreed. Yeah. Right. And so first thing we did was reach out to him. Was like, hey, you disagree? Let's have you on the show to talk about it. Like, let's have a mature conversation about it. And as a content creator, we all have to think like that. We all have to open up our minds to these different types of opinions and stances and just have the dialogue. But instead of getting Twitter fingers and people going comment crazy in the comments, like just invite them on the platform and have a conversation like that. And the ones where people disagree, go to craziest, because it's like now it becomes a healthy debate as opposed to two people saying the same thing and seconding each other's voices.
Exactly. So I like to be straightforward on this podcast as well. So there's two things I like to be straightforward and I like to be selfish, because I like to ask selfish questions, because that's why we're here. Right. Now I'm gonna go the straightforward route. In the beginning, I felt like there was like 4 guys on the podcast, but there's only 2 now. What happened?
4 guys on the podcast. I would say that you talking about on Hardly Initiated.
Yeah.
Nah, it was never 4 guys. The 2 co-hosts are definitely Ryan and Ty. Now they might have had like some guys that was on there like for a couple episodes, but as far as I remember, it's definitely just been them 2.
Really? Yeah. Maybe it was the couple of episodes that was going on, because I was like, yo, like there's where everybody else at? You know what I'm saying? I peep from here and there because 1, I want to be on the podcast. That's 1. So I'm paying attention, right? 2, because as a producer, I'm looking at what other people are doing. You know what I'm saying? I'm peeping, okay, what are some of the things that they did differently? Like maybe this clearly didn't happen because you just cleared it up. But like there are times on podcasts where, there was 3 or 4 people, but it ended up being 2. And that happens a lot. And that happens a lot. Yeah. And so like I'm paying attention to see like, okay, why did that not happen? Maybe they had an episode explaining it. Maybe they didn't have an episode explaining it. So then I'm like, okay, well, why? In my head, I'm like, what can make somebody say, you can't be on a podcast anymore? So like, have you ever had a situation, and it's not just needing somebody as a co-host, but like as a person on the podcast, we're like, no, we're not using. They can't come back.
Yeah, so not in the necessarily the sense like they can't come back, but we have had a couple of podcasts where, you know, the guests the host have like parted ways, or a host had to kind of like divest from the platform just because of time management and just not because of any beef. But I will say, like, for anybody who is looking to start a podcast, a lot of people, because they feel like they don't have any value, they feel like, oh, I automatically got to get a co-host. I think that guest is the best way to go about it, because the more people you add to the equation, the more difficult it comes to being able to be on the same page all the time, especially when it comes to scheduling, especially when it comes to the types of conversations, the content. You might have some really good ideas, like a direction you want to take the content, like, oh, I want to do this type of content instead of the content that we already producing.
Right.
And some people might be already comfortable with that and not open to trying new types of content out. So that would be a problem that I do see a lot of people. And part of that 90%, I would say of that 90%, 50% is because of the hardships that two people go through of being co-hosts together.
So let me ask you this, right? So you mentioned that some people may leave because of certain situations, and then you brought up the actual outreach of having guests on. Can you break down how to bring a guest onto the show, how to reach out? Is there like certain tips that you can give a person to bring more guests? Because I will say, it's not hard. It's not hard, but it's not easy bringing guests on to the show either.
Not easy bringing quality guests on.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So can you break down how exactly maybe your outreach strategy on getting guests, especially if you're doing hundreds of videos, tens of videos? Like, can you break that down for us?
Yeah, I would say right now that IG is definitely my best friend when it comes to like outreach and stuff like that. And if you are a guest listening and you've been on my podcast, don't take this the wrong way, but I will say this: you got to have templated messages. Like, just save yourself the time. The great thing about IG is you can save messages to where you type in podcast and your templated message will come up, and you don't have to keep sending out texting the same thing over and over again. Template your messages so that way you have a process now that makes it easier for you to do this outreach, because you are talking about, if you just now starting, sending out 10, 20, 30 DMs a day if you're trying to get your numbers up as far as like getting these guests on. So I would say come up with that template, and in that template you want to include room for you to talk about what makes them pop out to you as a guest, right? Like butter them up a little bit, like love what you're doing, see that you talk about XYZ, would love to have you on to have some great conversation about X, right? It just butters them up, lets them know that you actually paying attention to them, and it gives you that opportunity to make that templated message read less templated, so they don't see it as a generic message that you send out to everybody, right? So that would be some advice that I would do. If you got a little bit more deeper pockets where like you don't think you can spend that much time doing outreach, you can always hire a virtual assistant and give them a script, give them a template, and have them just set the metrics, right? You know, we meet with our virtual assistants, daily, where we go over KPI, see how many outbound, DMs they sent, how many, we have a whole guest recruiting process now where we go from DM sent to second attempt, third attempt, all the way down to scheduled and onboarded, right? So I would definitely say the key is creating processes and systems, so when you do burn yourself out, you can bring somebody else that, might offer some help, or you could pay somebody for that help.
Yo, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, you got to use the VAs. Bro.
Yeah, man. I'm so glad you brought that up. Before we get into the VAs, because that's important, I want to talk about that process that you said, second attempt, third attempt. When do you say, you know what, it's a wrap? We don't need, they not responding.
Yeah, after the second attempt, but third attempt max, right? Like if somebody is not responding to you after the third attempt, and you have like other means of communicating with them, like email or a phone number, and they still not getting back to you, they're just not showing that interest, right? Motivation is a level of interest. If somebody's motivated, if somebody's responding back to you, that shows that they're interested in getting on. If they're not responding, they're not interested. So just move on to the next person.
Okay. So when it comes to KPIs, what's a good KPI for a virtual assistant doing outreach?
I would say starting off about 20, 30 DMs.
Is that per day or is that per week?
I would say that's per day. Yeah, for sure.
20, 30 DMs.
Yeah, but to do this successfully, you definitely want to give them a guest avatar, give them an idea of what you're looking at. Because if you are like most people and you're getting your virtual assistants from like the Philippines or, these other countries, they're not familiar with, for the most part, they might be familiar with American culture, but they don't necessarily know exactly who you looking for as a guest. So give them some type of avatar so that they have a framework of knowing who to reach out to. Because at first, man, without that, we was getting we was DMing a lot of people that we didn't even want to get on the show. Damn. We had to like tell the VA like, nah, we don't want these type of people.
Man, yeah, I'm having as you know, my VA went and did the outreach, right? So if you weren't aware,
okay, I can believe it. You got the VA business.
Yeah. So like I had my VAs do all of the outreach, and I didn't think about KPIs. I didn't think about, mind you, that person isn't really a outreach person. So like, how does the compensation work for an outreach person?
I mean, it's like, I'll be honest. Over in the Philippines, like you can really get a good virtual assistant for about like $500 every 2 weeks. If you really got it going on, maybe a month, and you can have them doing outreach only, but you can also even have them doing other things like the scheduling, sending out the Calendly links, doing the onboarding calls, sending over the emails. If you sending out guest appearance documents for them to sign and stuff like that. Like it doesn't have to be only the DMs. If they're doing more than DMs, that's where the KPIs are really important, because you got to make sure you as a business owner understand like this person not stealing time from you, like that they actually putting in work. On average, if it'll take them, 2 to 3 hours to send 20, 30 DMs, but you paying them for an 8-hour day, is like you now need to know and create work for them.
Exactly. So break down that pipeline for our audience real quick. So you said you have you broke down like outreach, first, second attempt, third attempt, and then like onboarding, and then like break that down. Like how does that kind of work?
So the first step of the process is definitely the bucket. Like the bucket is where the VA is going to throw in all the prospects for you to be able to approve. I would say that having an approval process definitely saves you a lot of time, saves your VA a lot of time, and saves you a lot of having to go backwards on work.
What do you mean an approval process?
Meaning like when I go to the bucket, I'm pretty much looking at all the prospects that he or she has added in that bucket. And then if I approve them, I move them over into approved. Now, approved then means ready for them to go outbound and send that DM, that templated message. So then they're only reaching out to people that are in the approved bucket. And now for the visual point of it, like for all your listeners who are familiar with Asana, this is done on Asana very well. You can also use other project management tools or CRMs like Monday, Slack. Yeah. Well, not Slack, Pipedrive.
Pipedrive would be
yeah. So you can use CRMs and project management tools for that. People who are not familiar with those, I would definitely say Asana by far is one of my favorites and the most user friendly to use, especially with creating a process like this. But back to the process, they send it after it's approved. Send out the message. That means first attempt. So now I'm able to track to see who's been reached, who's been reached out to or not. So after they send out the message, they move them manually to first attempt. Then after about, I would say 3 days of no response, then we move them over in the second attempt. We send out another message. And then the third attempt, after about another 3 days, I would say 3 to 5 days, then we go ahead and move them into closed lost. We won't delete them. We'll move them into closed lost so that
they may reach out later on.
They might reach back out, exactly. Yeah. And so after that, let's say they responded. We got a whole section for that. Responded. And then we got scheduled. And then we have onboarding sent. And then we have offboarding sent. And then we have recorded and then close one after, we in the post-production.
Got you. So offboarding is what?
Offboarding is more so the opportunity for you as a podcaster to get referrals. We might say, hey, or let them know where they can find the episode, when they can find the episode, giving them the little nuances that y'all might have even already talked about in person after the episode was done. But just either sending them a text or an email saying, thank you, really appreciate you. You might even offer to send them a gift and then asking for, again, referrals. Like, hey, do you have any, colleagues or partners that you think would also benefit from being on this platform? If so, could you send me a couple referrals? And we do that in the offboarding process.
And I'm guessing this is still in the DMs or at this point, maybe through a text message.
I say once you meet somebody in person, it is best to get their phone number.
100%.
Yeah, your network is your net worth, and especially if you're doing your job, you getting some great quality guests on. Like it's just good to have their phone number.
For sure. That's a bar. So for anybody that is not aware of what he just said, I'm definitely gonna implement this like tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Like it's gonna be the whole new process. But I have one last question about that before we move on to the next question. You said that there's a bucket list, right? So like, is there a certain amount of people that you want on there first before there's an approval? Like, how does that work?
I will approve them anytime I can. Right. Mm-hmm. So like, it doesn't matter if it's 5 people in the bucket, which it should never be just 5 people, or if it's 100 people in that bucket. If I see that there's no one in approved, that lets me know I need to go into the bucket and move some people into approved, because he or she not going to send out the DM if there's nobody approved to even go outbound on.
Got you. Okay.
So whenever that approved is empty is probably when you want to go and go through your approvals.
Understood. So going back to the virtual assistants and why virtual assistants is so crucial within the business, is that the only virtual assistant that you all have? Or can you actually explain to the audience what a virtual assistant is before we even get to that?
Yeah, like virtual assistant, ChatGPT is a virtual assistant nowadays, right? Facts. A virtual assistant is just someone or something that makes your job a lot easier and helps you be able to focus on the innovation, the creativity, but not the mundane things. Like, what are mundane things when it comes to having a podcast? Sending out the calendar invite, sending out the notifications, the reminders, sending out the preparation material if you have a very unique type of show for your guests. Like, these are all mundane tasks that a virtual assistant can do. And even like, if you think back into your scheduling tools like a Calendly or a booking tool, these are also virtual assistants if you are using them right. Mm-hmm. By adding those automations. Like, mine's already have plugins that sends my guests an automatic text the day before, 3 days before, sends them even a link for them to do their own research, sends them a document for them to prep for the show. Like, It does this automatically. So all I have to do, or all my VA has to do, is send them the booking link. And once they book, like, they getting nurtured already.
So how many virtual assistants do you all have? Well, let me ask this. Is it where you have your own virtual assistants, or is it the virtual assistants that are also a part of the team?
It's a part of the podcasts? Team. Yeah, so it's a part of the team. I don't have any virtual assistants as far as like my personal brand. Mm-hmm. I have editors though. I have about 3 editors that edit like short form content, long form content for me. And then outside of that, I really, really, really love using ChatGPT and Bard AI. I abuse them. Yeah, bro. Like, especially if you know, like, if you are a very good prompter, like, you know how to prompt the AI and
ask the right questions.
Ask the right questions. You get everything you need, and sometimes even more efficiently than a virtual assistant, because there is that language barrier.
Exactly. So how many podcasts do you produce?
Man, that's a great question. At one point I lost track, but I would say I am producing about 5 podcasts right now outside of the $1 Million Mind podcast.
Got you. So what, can you name the podcast, or some like, on the down low?
No, we actually just started this new podcast called Betting on Me podcast. That'll be launching next month. It's a podcast started by a company called Mental Health is Wealth. So that's a mental health podcast. Yeah. We got, of course, Hardly Initiated. We got another podcast called Cash Culture. And we have another one called The House of 20 something, which I would consider that like the female version of Hardly Initiated. We don't have the platform there yet, like as far as the numbers and the subs, but it's there. And then I just started working with Coach Chris Crump, right hand man to Jeremy Anderson, on the Boy Man King podcast.
Dang, that's a lot of podcasts.
Yeah, bro. It's a lot, bro. They pay the bills, man, and it's definitely a passion of mine for sure.
So how do you manage your time? Like, can you break down? I'm curious. I'm always curious when it comes to these things. Like, what's a daily routine in your day? Like, give us like a day where you're like, from waking up to going to sleep. Like, how does it work for you?
Right. So I'll wake up earlier. Now the wake up part, that is not always consistent. There's some days where I might wake up at 6:30. I might wake up at 9 o'clock. But my work day on average starts at 10 a.m. And the first thing I do is look at my calendar. Look, if it's not on the calendar, it is not real. If you don't
That's
have that thing on the
facts.
calendar, you most likely going to forget. You most likely going to double book yourself. It's not real. So at 10 a.m., I start my day by looking at my calendar, looking at ways that I can fill up some time that I really want to fill up, look up some ways that I could clear my schedule if I need to, and just make sure that I have, what appointments I have so I can prepare mentally for those meetings and those appointments. After that, the next thing I go to is my Asana. My Asana, I have it very well organized to where I have a whole team. I can, see all the productions that I'm working on. I can go to different boards. I can see what tasks are overdue, what tasks need to get done. And I pretty much just from there, I'll schedule my calls and my meetings with my team based on the activities and tasks that I see need to get done for the day.
Okay. All right. That was the fastest I've ever seen somebody go through their day, man.
Bro, it's really outside of that. Like, the whole booked and busy to me is a little bit overrated. Like, I'm blessed. I definitely am very grateful for the opportunities that, God has given me. And I love that I have a schedule. But my goal is not to be booked and busy. My goal is to be free and clear. Like the reason why I even value what I do as a producer is because I am able to spend very good quality time with my wife and my family. Like, that's what I value the most, being able to spend quality time with my loved ones. And being tied down in an environment where I have to be behind the desk or just in a room for 8 hours, 12 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and just going through those motions, one, it can be very easy to become stagnant, very comfortable with that. And then you're not challenging yourself anymore. And then two, you start missing out on moments that are very important to you. And those are two things that I really do not want to even subject myself to. Okay,
so do you have kids? Or you and the wife?
Yeah, just me and wifey. We got we got a dog, we got a cat, but we ain't got no kids yet.
Well, they count. Yeah. So how do you think your day will change when having children, like routine wise? Would you be able to still knock out the same amount of podcasts or to produce the same amount of podcasts, or would you have to, pull back on some? Like, how would that work?
That's a great question. Being that I'm not there yet, I wouldn't know all the way, but the first response to answer that question is I don't think that it will really affect much. If anything, I feel like I will be waking up a lot earlier, right? Starting my day earlier. I might even be going to sleep later and everything like that. But outside of that, I don't think much will change because I'm a big proponent of the family business. So like granted, a newborn may not be coming to the studio with me. The 1-year-old may not be coming to that studio with me, but that 2-year-old coming to the studio.
They on the way.
They like, I can't wait for the moment to be able to like bring my kids, like just like I brought my wife with me here. Like, I love that. Like, I love being able to bring my family the things that I'm doing so that they can see it, so they can see if that's an interest to them. Right. So that one day, maybe, who knows, I'm raising a little mini producer, somebody looking to take on, dad's gigs and, help out and really be a part of what we building, which is a media company.
That's lit. We're planning on buying media and owning media at the same time. So like what we're doing is it starts off with the podcast. We're buying shout out pages, right? To start that media, to really get that notoriety. So we're building that network.
That's great digital real estate right there too, by the way.
What? It's crazy. It's a faceless business. Do you know what I'm saying? So like having a shout out page that just runs on autopilot without you needing, that's a VA thing that you put there. But like that's how we can. And then free promotion, free exposure for the business. So like I highly suggest anybody just go ahead and get a shout out page, purchase the shout out page, and post yourself every single week on that shout out page. Is just free exposure at all times. You know what I'm saying? So I got one last question for the people. I like to ask this on my podcast. If you could think of yourself, like where do you feel you would be 3 to 5 years from now? My dog out here wanting attention. That's crazy.
Man, it's so crazy. My back in Miami when we was trapping out the apartment, bro, we had my cat used to love.
Did he just say trapping out the apartment?
Yeah.
Am I tripping right now?
No, you're not tripping. When we had the show, bro, man, my cat used to be all up on my guest's lap, trying to be in the mix.
She want attention, man. That's crazy.
Yeah, she looking.
She like, what are all these chords here? You get what I'm saying? But I want to ask you a question. If you could see yourself 3 to 5 years, where do you feel you would be?
Man, 3 to 5 years, bro. Definitely at I wouldn't even say the top of my game, but very close to it, meaning that I am increasing my capacity, producing more, creating some short films, some even, feature films, Definitely seeing a film or two on, Netflix and one of these streaming apps that you guys are used to. And my community definitely well into the thousands as far as, helping entrepreneurs, helping content creators, be able to create the life that they want through content creation and film.
That's dope. And just thinking back at the media part that we were just talking about, would you consider the podcast that you produce pretty much being a network of other producers? You know how EYL has other podcasts under him. That's what we're planning on doing with the Fampreneur, right? So we have like 3 or 4 podcasts that we have under our network. My question for you is, the podcast that you have you considered it to be your own network?
Yes and no. So not the $1 Million Mind podcast, but I have another YouTube channel for my own personal brand and productions. That is the network, and that's where all of my podcasts are featured on. So like we have playlists, we have the featured channels all there on the page so people can see all the productions that we're working on. But ultimately, yes, the network is important. Having a network, again, going back into, identifying who your target audience is and really niching down. That's where the most successful networks really get the best bang for their buck, because they're creating. It's like you might somewhat enjoy my show, right? But you love this other show I produce, right? And then for the people who don't love or like this show, I got this other show that's for you. And then for those people, I got another show that's for you. So it's just giving people options. What keeps people from paying that fee on Netflix, whether they increase the price from $5.99 down to $49.99, right? That might get a little tricky, right?
Yeah, facts. Yeah, we hit more double
close.
Digits. You feel?
Yeah,
they starting to get to the threes. You feel what I'm saying?
They're getting close. But the reason why people willing to pay it, outside of the fact that they gonna share the login,
no cap,
is the
or
fact
they
that
do that Netflix party now. They're gonna probably do that more often.
Exactly. But it's just the fact that they got options, right? Like Netflix don't just only have Netflix originals, right? They have the classics on there. They got the stuff that has already been proven, that has a concept that people love already. So I would say that is just looking at. People just got to do research. Even before you start a podcast, like look at what's already working. Look at what resonates with people, especially if it's similar. Like look at somebody that you want to emulate. Look at somebody that is already doing it right. And you like, I really love that content. Like stop trying to reinvent the wheel. Don't just buy the wheel, or just figure out a way to make that wheel. Right. And just run with it.
So you're viewing this more of similar as a streaming platform. Yeah. Where it's like you're not saying, logging in, but logging in is like going to a YouTube channel or channels, right? And seeing different options for them to choose from. That's actually very an interesting concept. I haven't thought. I think the media company is similar, but like it's different at the same time, because Netflix is a media company. Exactly. But it's a streaming company. Exactly. Or a streaming SaaS company.
It's two separate
things. Exactly.
Right? So they got different departments. They got the people who solely focus on the user interface of the app, how the app looks, what the genres are, what the segments look like. They got that. And then they have a whole nother department that solely focuses on acquisitions. Like, how do we acquire new talent? How do we acquire new directors, new film producers? How do we get people? And that's just for the sales of acquiring the non-Netflix originals. They got a whole nother department for the Netflix
originals. Yeah. Right? And then they got the media team to actually film the Netflix originals.
Exactly.
Then they have an outreach team to find the selected movies and shows that's not Netflix originals to be on there.
Exactly. And that's kind of where we are right now, is being a one-stop shop for business owners, especially who are looking to jump into that podcast, because podcasting, honestly, it is most ideal, especially in this day and age, is most ideal for the business owner because it's free marketing. Right. You are creating a platform that you can consistently market your products and services to, and just bring other people to second and like stand on the reason why your products and services are good. So I always advise business owners to start a podcast, and we have become that one-stop shop to be able to provide everything they need, even down to the content, the creative direction of letting them know, like, hey, no, you don't want to approach it this way. You want to approach it that way. Hey, you want this type of lighting, or you want this type of setup. We're going to set it up for you. We're going to come through. We're going to edit the short clips. You want to schedule your short clips. Like, we handle the entire process, even down to the scheduling and the social media management.
Nice. That's a great concept. I want to go ahead and just promote you, bro? Like, just can you explain to the camera, like, what exactly you do? How can you help people? How can people reach out to you? Like, where to follow you? Can you let people know?
Yeah, first thing, man, it was a pleasure, man. I appreciate you reaching out and getting me on the platform. And for any of this information might have went over your head, you can go to my IG. That's Kai.speaks, QUIY.speaks, SPEAKS, and ask any questions that you need to. I put out a lot of content around content creation, podcast production. For my business owners, like I said, if you're looking to start a podcast for that free marketing engine that you need, you can get with me. We handle the whole podcast production from A to Z. And then for my folks out there that may not even have a podcast yet or even think that a podcast is for them, we have something for you as well. We actually have a community for content creators called the Creators Community, where we lock in every single Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time to go over extensive content creation training, tips, strategies on how you can not just get a bigger exposure on your audience, but you can even monetize your platforms. A lot of people think, bro, that you got to have hundreds of thousands of followers to be able to make some money off of these pages, but you can literally start getting paid for your content with 100 followers. And how do I know this? I have a few people in the community already making money, with just 100 followers. We had a guy right now just made $2,000 in 2 weeks just by running one play that we went over in these calls. And the beauty of it is it's super accessible to you. It's $10 a month, and that's for 4 weekly calls with not just myself, but with the community. So you also get a chance to collaborate and network with other content creators as well.
Man, that's dope, man. Look, y'all heard it from the man himself, the GOAT himself, the man who's been really killing the game. So y'all go follow this man. Look, this is me not just seconding it. This is like a referral. So there is nothing stronger than a referral. So I want
and
you
I got something for your people too, Marcus. Like,
that's lit.
Yeah, if you go to my website, kaispeaks.com/community, you'll be able to look at that, book your time, join the community. Like I said, it's $10 a month. You let us know that you came here from the digital empire, and we got a special gift for you as well. Okay,
man. Look, man, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's lit. So you look, like I said, there's nothing else we really need to say. This man gave you a stupid amount of game. Most people don't even give this game. This is why y'all tune into our podcast, because we kill the game every single time. So my man, I appreciate you for hopping on. You already know, like and subscribe wherever you see your podcast. Give me a review. I want to know how you feel and who you want up here next. You see what I'm saying? So I appreciate y'all, and I will see you in the next one.